Hi everyone, this is David from Spooky Owls. We're trying this out for the first time today. It's the first kind of video interview we've done during COVID-19. Not a lot of people are getting out at the moment doing paranormal investigations because of the lockdown we've got here in London. And I'm talking to Rick Hale, who's one of our writers. He's based in Chicago. How's it going, Rick?
Just fine, thank you. How are you, David?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. It's a bit hard going at the moment for everyone. But the good thing that we've got going for us is that we've got the internet and lots of spooky things to read. What are you reading at the moment?
I am a huge fan of the Jim Butcher Dresden Files novels. So I'm reading Blood Rights at the moment, and I'm also kind of going back and forth between a couple of Peter Underwood books.
Okay, what Peter Underwood books are you reading at the moment?
Ghosts of Northwest England and This Haunted Isle.
Okay, they're very good ones. I think that the Ghosts of Northeast England, if that's one that you just said,
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, I think that's what it is. That's just been put out on Kindle or something, hasn't it?
Yeah, in fact, I just scooped and scored on that a couple days ago.
That's all very good. And I imagine you must use quite a lot of Peter Underwood's work when you're doing your own research for some of the work you've done for Spooky Hours. What do you think it was about Peter Underwood that has made him such a loved and cherished figure here in British folklore and paranormal circles?
I think that his honesty, integrity, and thoroughness really made him a great investigator as well as a great writer. He puts a great amount of detail into his work, and you walk away from reading one of his books, and you're like, man, I just heard a really good ghost story, and that's what I try to do with my own writing. Um, I inject myself into it just as much as he did. He really is one of my main, um, people that I really, look to in my own research and as an investigator. So, yeah, he's a real inspiration.
I know it's obviously a lot harder for you to maybe investigate some of the places you're writing about here in England and Great Britain, but when you're doing your writing, you do a lot of work doing Illinois type of ghost stories. Do you go out much and have a look at some of the sites you're writing about?
It has been a very long time. I did, however, go to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, which is on the south side of Chicago, in the town of Midlothian, and it's one of our more famous haunted sites. Went out there with a buddy of mine, Michael Kravchuk, and we did a few videos out there, and did an investigation. It's my absolute favorite place in the in and around the city. But as an investigator, I've specialized in doing private home investigations since the early 90s. So, a lot of the thing I can write about those investigations, as long as I keep people's names and locations out of it and just keep it very general. But that's always been my thing. I'm not one of the investigators that go out there all too often and pay to do investigations. I do that every now and then. Back in November, I can't remember if it was October, November, went to Tinker Swiss Cottage in Rockford, Illinois, which is um, probably about 3.5 hours northwest of Chicago, and went out there with Chicago Hauntings tours. And I'm doing that again, hopefully doing that again in May. But we'll see where this COVID-19 stuff takes us.
So, I mean, obviously, when you're doing a public site, you could say the name of the place. Some of them actually quite like it because it advertises. But I imagine the more thrilling stories, the more investigations are the private home investigations you do. Can you tell me
Yeah.
about some of those? I know you can't give us names of the places, but maybe tell us about some of those things that might be a bit more revealing about the world of paranormal than you might get in some of these more overly used sites.
Sure. I think that probably the most interesting investigation that I've ever done in a private home was at a house in Waukegan, Illinois, which is um, maybe an hour and a half north of Chicago. And it was a Armenian family, and this will become salient to the conversation here in a little bit. They were an Armenian family, and they had been living in this house for a couple of years, and they had a they had activity, but it really had been stepping up over the last year or so that they were there. So this was when I was a member of a larger group, the McHenry County Paranormal Research Group, and we got called there to do an investigation. Probably about midway through the investigation, we're standing in the kitchen, and there's a kitchen and a long hallway. There's a bedroom to the left, and there's a dining room to the right, and straight ahead from there is the front room or living room. And we're standing there, we're talking to the homeowner's mother. Um, and I'm looking down the hall, and all of a sudden, this tall, blonde haired woman in white just appears. Like she's just there. It's not like there was like a mist and then boom. It's just, she just appeared. And when I say that she's wearing white clothes, it looks like what she's wearing are nursing or doctor scrubs.
Mm.
And I watch this woman appear, and she walks up the hall a little bit and then takes a left into this bedroom that is in that hall. So I grab another investigator. Actually, she's a medium, and we run into the bedroom. And the only people there are the homeowner's daughter, two teenage girls, the homeowner's daughter, and her friend who was African American. And like I said, and this is where it becomes, important, the Armenian. They were a family of very dark hair and, olive colored skin, much like the Kardashians that people see on television. And so she's in there with her friend who, is African American. And we walk in and we're like, where is the lady with the blonde hair? Now, this bedroom is slightly bigger than a broom closet, and there's nowhere for anybody to hide, especially a tall, blonde-haired woman wearing white clothing. And the friend looks up at us like with a scared look on her face, and she's like, "What lady?" And the girl, the daughter of the homeowner, looks at me and says, "You saw her too." So this was like an apparition that the family sees regularly in the home. And, I'm not one of those people that I need a great deal of evidence, recordings and pictures. If I see it with my own eyes, that the personal experience for me is just as important as capturing something on video or in a picture or on a recording. And that really just sealed the deal with me that house was absolutely haunted.
Tell us about what you saw, though. You saw a white woman. You thought she looked like a nurse, but she was in white. Was she opaque? Could you see through her? Did she look like me and you, but look a bit whiter?
Solid as you and I look. I mean, if you were to not see this woman just suddenly appear before your eyes, you would have thought that this was a living, breathing human being, because it was just as solid as you and I. And
People often do say that, though, don't they? That ghosts are not the white ones you go through walls and stuff like that. They just look like a person, and then 1 minute they're there, 1 minute they're gone.
right, but of course you get those too. You
Yeah.
get the misty kind of figures and the solid figures and the ghostly figures that walk through walls. And I mean, you do have that, but I think that that's one of the things that makes this kind of research and investigation so fascinating. You just really never know what to expect. It's
Yeah.
not called spontaneous activity for nothing.
No. So did you work out what this was going on in this house? It was this Armenian family's house, or you just saw something and that was it? What happened next?
Well, of course, we had gathered a great, a lot of evidence. One of the best pieces of evidence that we gathered was, it was me doing an EVP session, and I asked, "How is it that you come into this home?" Later on, upon review, I hear this super eerie voice say to me, "They want us to come in through the window." So we're thinking that this hold on, let me go back. I got ahead of myself. There was a big window in the front room, and that was where the EVP was captured. So we're thinking that this window probably acted as some kind of a portal, and these entities could come and go at will. And the people that lived in this home, surprisingly, were very comfortable with their ghosts. They
Mm.
really just didn't mind that they had several entities living in this home. In fact, I wrote about this incident in my second book, Behold Shocking True Tales of Terror and some other spooky stuff, in a chapter called The House of 100 Spirits, because I am convinced that this house was the frat house of the dead, to be honest with you. I really do believe that there was a large amount of ghosts in this home that could come and go at will. From everything that the homeowner told me, from what I saw that night, and from what other investigators in the group experienced that night, that yeah, this was definitely the most haunted place I have ever been
Why do
in
you think
my time
that was?
as a
What was
creator.
it about the place? What was it about the place that attracted so many spirits?
That's one of those things nobody really knows. I mean, you have people talk about portals. You have um, two different kinds of portals. You have one portal that is naturally occurring, which I believe that this is what was going on in this home, that this was a naturally occurring portal. And then you have portals that are opened through occult or magical means. And like I said, I do believe that this was a naturally occurring portal, and it was probably there way before the house was ever there. And it just so happened to be where the window was.
Mm. So, talking about your investigations, in the US, and we're obviously here in London. This is Spooky Isles, which is all based about British and Irish spooky things. From the time you've written for us, which has been well over 2 years now, and you've done over 100 articles, I think that's about 120, if I think rightly. So you've done a lot of research into British and Irish ghosts.
Mm.
What are the differences? Now we know there are differences between the way that American parapsychologists and British
Sure.
parapsychologists do their business. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that from your perspective?
Sure. One of the things that I really like about the British way of doing it, I've long been fascinated with English and Irish ghost stories. When I first got interested in this back in the early 80s, you couldn't just walk into a library or a bookstore and find hundreds of books on the subject of ghosts and hauntings here in the United States. At that time, it was still considered very much a taboo subject. However, not so much in your part of the world,
Yeah,
across the pond, people say. So my earlier influences were um, people like Hans Holzer, who of course was an American, was a German American investigator, but people like Peter Underwood, Elliot O'Donnell, Guy Lyon Playfair, who I had the pleasure of interviewing for a show that I used to do a couple of years before he passed.
he also wrote for Spooky Isles, and we actually presented him
Oh,
when I was working with the Ghost Club. So yeah, so I mean I've met him as well. So very charming fellow.
yeah, I really enjoyed my time talking to him. Um, those are the kind of people that you want to impress. Not the superstar ghost hunters that we have here in the United States. So one of the things that I've always taken with me that is a difference between American ghost hunters and British ghost hunters is the personal experience. I find that here in the United States, the personal experience sort of takes the back seat to gathering hardcore evidence, which, of course, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But what I like as a paranormal researcher, I like the personal experience and sitting vigil as English parapsychologists have called it since the 1880s, sitting vigil and more or less waiting for things to happen. My first investigation that I did back in 1991, I was 17 years old. It was at a house, and I just sat there with a piece of paper, or I'm sorry, with a pad of paper and a pen, excuse me, I have really bad seasonal allergies, which kind of freaks people out.
I know,
Right now.
I know a couple of people doing that at the moment. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think COVID's you get a sneeze with it. So I think that you're safe enough. So
Oh. So, my first investigation was I had a pad of paper and a pen and just sort of sat and waited for something to happen. And that is, I think, the huge difference between how you do it in England and how we do it here in the United States. So I like to keep both my options open. I do, of course, use equipment, but at the same time, I kind of just like to keep it organic as well. Um, that, of course, being the big difference. And the I think that another huge difference is the use of the Ouija board.
mm,
Now, I know that I talk with many British investigators, and they use a Ouija board like it's a part of their equipment, and there's no weirdness attached to it. Whereas here in the United States, um, people they're afraid of opening a doorway to hell and letting demons come in. And I personally don't use one only because it's not my jam. So, but I think that that's another huge difference between between American and British investigators. And the third big difference is there is a lot of tradition that goes into British ghost hunting. Um, Here in the United States, it's not a relatively new thing. However, it's really gotten more exposure since the release of the Ghost Hunters television show back in 2004. But there is a rich tradition of parapsychology and psychical research that comes out of Britain and has been around since well, I think the London Ghost Club was created in the 1860s, and a couple of guys from the London Ghost Club went and created the Society for Psychical Research in the 1880s. So you have that rich tradition of parapsychology that runs very, very deep in uh, in British folklore. Oh, and number four, you guys are a lot older than we are. So you have homes and cottages and castles that are 1,000 years old. And here we have, I think our oldest building was maybe built in the sometime in the 1600s.
I just think from my perspective, just looking at what it is, like I think you get the word demon thrown around a lot more in American ghost
Yes.
hunting. Like everything seems to be a demon, and it's possessed, and it's evil, and it's all whatever it might be. I think that's something you get there. Now, I don't know if that's because you see a lot of it on the television. I don't know if when you're out there doing your normal thing, your more amateur style, not for the audience type of investigations, you might not it's a demon. But also, and this is probably definitely I imagine more of a something from television to movies. Everything seems to be, something on an old Indian burial ground. There's always something, and it's always everything's so violent. Everything with and that must be television because you don't seem to have that. You have ghosts, poltergeists, and all sorts of things here in Britain, and there's lots of knocking, and there's maybe feel a bit sick, but there's never quite the violence. Is that just a television movie type thing in America?
I think it is. Especially where the demon thing is involved. You see that on television, like every other episode of certain television shows that I don't mention because I think they're ridiculous. But yeah, I've been investigating claims of ghosts and haunting since 1991. I've never come across anything like that. So, you know, television shows are breaking the law of averages.
Yeah.
By, oh my God, this place is infested with demons and we're getting possessed. And that's just not how it is. Now, a friend of mine, a colleague from England, Mark English, he's another old schooler that's been doing this for a long time, and he theorizes that because that in England, your approach to this is a little bit more secular than ours. We have very deep-seated religious organizations in this country, And a lot of this gets filtered through people's religious beliefs. And a lot of people seem to think that um, just because a spirit or a ghost is unpleasant, well, then that must be a demon. And also, too, we're very entertainment oriented in here. So when people they see this on television, they think, "Oh my God, the world must be crawling with demons, and we must go hunt them down and eradicate them." And assuming such a phenomenon even exists at all, I honestly don't believe for a second that Zach Bagans would know what the hell to do if he actually came across something like that. I think that the human mind is finite, and we are not fully meant to grasp the infinite. And things like demons, assuming they exist, or ghosts or spirits, are the infinite. We are merely scratching the surface with this, although organized parapsychology has been around for 100 and almost 140 years. We have barely scratched the surface of where this is coming from, and where this is going. Um, I think that we've made amazing strides. If anything, the television shows have opened people's minds to a possibility that these kind of things do exist. And you know, and I know, we've both experienced enough to know that yes, these things do exist. But what they are, that is where we're still trying to figure it out.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Rick. We'll just leave it. This is Spooky Isles. We're not all about paranormal and that kind of ghosty type thing. We're also into horror films. So
Oh yeah.
we obviously people have a lot of time over the next couple of months to spend watching horror films. What's something you might like to look back on? Maybe some British horror that you've haven't seen in a while that you might have another look at.
You know, I really need to go back and watch a lot of Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
He's my apps. I love Hammer films. I love those when I was a kid growing up. So I really need to find a way to go back and watch those. I think that those are great. I love the classics. I don't like a lot of this newer stuff where everything has to be some psychotic guy in a mask hunting co-eds. That's just not my thing. I like my horror movies to have a a sense of the supernatural involved, and I think that you get that with a lot of the Hammer films, especially where with vampires and are involved in werewolves
They
and
are, they are
monsters.
they are psychotic killers chasing co-eds, but they have capes on, so maybe it's a little bit more classy. So, well, thanks for that, Rick. It's been wonderful talking to you. We'll catch up again. You take care of yourself, you and your family. It's hard time at the moment, but we're in here safe, obviously, and we'll chat again and look forward to your next article on SpookyIsles.com.
Okay, thanks a lot, David.
All right, see you later. Bye bye.